When I was 15, my parents kicked me out. No warning, no fight, no drama. Just a garbage bag filled with my clothes and my dad saying Lana wants her own room, Jude. Be mature about it. That's it? That's the reason. My older sister wanted her own bedroom, and apparently my existence was the only thing in the way. I stood there still in pajamas, blinking at them like they'd just said the sky was green. Where am I supposed to go? My mom didn't even look up from her phone. You've got friends. Use your phone. Figure it out, Jay. That was 7 months ago. Today, they're calling non-stop, begging me to come back, crying, apologizing, promising they've changed. But back then, all they cared about was Lana's birthday wish and making me disappear. Let me explain. My name's Jalen. I'm 15 now, but this really started long before my birthday exile. I just didn't want to see it. My dad is black. My mom's white. Lana, my older sister by 2 years, looks like mom's straight hair, light skin, blue eyes. I look more like dad. Darker skin, tight curls, wide nose. Funny thing is, even though dad is black, he's always had this twisted thing about looking too black. Mom, don't even get me started. To her, dad is the exception, and I'm the mistake. Growing up, Lana got Barbie-themed birthday parties, backyard tents, a whole freaking bounce house once. Me, I got a pat on the back and maybe pancakes if dad wasn't too hungover from celebrating Lana's week. And yeah, it was a week. Lana's birthday wasn't a day, it was a season. But the weirdest part, Lana was never mean. Not to me, anyway. She'd sneak me snacks when they forgot to feed me after her parties. Shared her cake with me when mom tried to cut around the slice I had touched. On my 10th birthday, she told them she wanted that day for her party just so I could have one. That day, she had everyone sing happy birthday to me while she distracted our parents with a fake phone call. That was one of the best days of my life. So when she betrayed me, when she stood there and said nothing while they packed my stuff into boxes, it cut deeper than anything. I remember that morning too clearly. It was Lana's 17th birthday. I woke up to loud voices and thumps downstairs. My brain thought it was just the party starting early. Instead, it was the sound of my childhood being boxed up like garage junk. I walked down the stairs and saw my clothes stuffed into a black trash bag. What's going on? I asked. Dad didn't even flinch. Lana wants her own space. She deserves it. You'll figure something out. Mom just said, use your phone, call someone. It's not like we're kicking you out into the street. But you are, I said, my voice cracking. Where am I supposed to sleep? Not our problem, Mom replied. Grow up. And Lana, she stood frozen. Didn't look at me, didn't say a word. Just hugged her new pillow set like it was a baby. I tried to laugh. Told them this had to be a prank. Even waited 5 minutes for someone to shout, gotcha. No one did. Eventually, I stopped crying and started packing. I took what I could, shoved it into 2 boxes, and walked out. I didn't even give Lana her gift. The only person I could think to call was Aunt Rita, Dad's younger sister. I hadn't seen her much since she moved across town, but she always smiled when she saw me at holidays. Hey, Auntie, I said, voice shaking. Is it okay if I come over for a while? No questions. Just yes, baby. I'll send you the address. While my Uber rolled through traffic, Lana called. My hand clenched when I saw her name, but I answered. Jay, she said, voice trembling. Please don't hate me. I didn't respond. Are you alone? She asked. Yeah. Then she flipped the camera. Showed me a white stick with 2 pink lines, pregnant. It hit me like a train. Why didn't you tell me? I whispered. I couldn't let them find out while you were still home. They'd blame you. Again. I remembered last year when she came home with a hickey. They yelled at me for being a bad influence. What do you need me to do? I asked. Talk to Aunt Rita. Tell her everything. Please don't tell Mom and Dad. Okay. Then I hung up. When I got to Aunt Rita's, she pulled me into the biggest hug I've ever had. Didn't ask questions, just said, you hungry? I hadn't eaten all day. As we sat down, I couldn't hold it in anymore. The tears, the pain, the confusion, it all came rushing out. I got kicked out because Lana's pregnant, I said between sobs. Aunt Rita blinked. Wait, what? And I told her. Everything. The racism, the favoritism, the birthday parties, the pinches when I got better grades the morning they told me to get out. And Lana's secret. She listened the whole time, didn't interrupt once. Finally, she said, you're staying here now, and your parents are about to hear from me. I woke up the next morning on Aunt Rita's couch. For a second, I forgot where I was. Then it all came back. My phone had 3 missed calls from Lana. None from my parents. Figures. Aunt Rita was already up making eggs and bacon. "You sleep okay?" she asked. "Better than I have in weeks," I mumbled, sitting down. She slid a plate toward me. "Eat, then we talk." Halfway through breakfast, she set her coffee down and said, "Has your dad ever hit you?" I almost dropped my fork. "No, not like full on, just slaps, pinches. That's abuse," she said, her voice flat. "And what they did yesterday, that was abandonment." I stared at the table. Something about hearing it out loud made it feel real for the first time. "They're not getting away with this," she said. My chest tightened. "But what about Lana? If you tell them you know, they'll know I told you about the baby. I won't mention that she promised. That's her story to tell. But they will hear from me." I called Lana while Aunt Rita cleaned up. She picked up instantly. "Are you okay?" "Did she let you stay?" Her words tumbled out in a rush. "I'm fine," I said. "She's going to call Mom and Dad, though." "Oh God," she breathed. "They still don't know about everything." "They will soon." She went quiet for a second. "Jay, I'm scared." "I know. I don't even know what I'm going to do. Keep it, abort, adopt. I haven't decided. I'll ask Aunt Rita if you can come here. She'll help." "Really?" "Yeah, come tomorrow after school." When I hung up, I heard Aunt Rita's voice from the other room. Low, cold, controlled, and very angry. She was on the phone with Dad. I couldn't make out the words, but the tone said it all. When she walked back in, she looked like she'd just stared down a tornado. "Well," she said, setting her phone down, "your father says you chose to leave, that they never kicked you out." I laughed, loud. "They literally packed my stuff." "I know," Aunt Rita said. Gaslighting 101. "But I made it clear you're staying with me now, and we're going to have a family meeting, soon." I wasn't ready, but I nodded. For now, I was safe. But this story was just getting started. I spent the rest of that day trying to make my room at Aunt Rita's feel like it belonged to me. It was small, just a twin bed and an old desk shoved against the wall, but it was mine. No Lana posters, no passive-aggressive sticky notes from Mom about toothpaste caps. Just quiet. And Aunt Rita. She brought in a stack of folded blankets and said, "Make it cozy. This is your space now." Then she handed me a Target gift card like it was some kind of emotional Band-Aid. "Get what you need. I'm working tomorrow, but you have the spare key. Lock the door behind you." The next morning, I woke up feeling lighter. Still weird, but lighter. I didn't have to tiptoe past my parents' room or pretend I was invisible at the breakfast table. I made myself cereal, sat on the couch in my boxers, and watched cartoons like I was 6 years old again. Not because I missed being a kid, but because for once, I didn't have to pretend to be older than I was just to survive. At 3:30, my stomach started doing that twisty, nervous thing it always does before something big. Lana was coming. She texted that she told Mom she was staying after school for group debate practice, but really, she was catching the bus to Rita's. I waited by the window until I saw her walk up, hoodie pulled over her head shoulders, hunched like she was hoping no one would recognize her. When I opened the door, she looked like she hadn't slept in days. We didn't say anything at first, just hugged, and not one of those quick sidearm hugs. This one had weight, regret, fear, familiarity. Inside, she kicked off her shoes and followed me into the kitchen. "Mom thinks I'm arguing about climate change with a bunch of sophomores right now," she said, trying to sound casual. "And Dad doesn't even care. As long as I'm not disrupting his football time." I got her a glass of water. "Aunt Rita's getting home soon. She said she wants to talk to you about everything. No pressure." Lana sat down at the table and stared at the condensation on the glass like it held answers. "I still can't believe they kicked you out like that," she muttered. "I thought they'd yell or guilt you or something. But just trash bags." I shrugged. They didn't even wait for the cake. When Aunt Rita came home, she barely had time to set down her purse before Lana ran into her arms and just started crying. The kind of cry that makes your chest shake and your throat close up. Aunt Rita didn't say anything, just held her like she'd been waiting her whole life to do it. After a while, they sat down and Lana told her everything. The test, the boy, the late period that made her spiral, how she kept putting off telling anyone because she didn't want to lose the only people who still called her good. Rita listened without blinking. "Have you seen a doctor?" she asked calmly. "Not yet. I've been too scared to go alone." "Then we're going together," she said without hesitation. The next morning they went to the clinic. I stayed behind and tried to do some homework, but mostly just kept refreshing my phone, waiting for an update. Around noon, Lana texted 8 weeks. That's how far along she was. 8 weeks. It hit me then, this wasn't just a secret. It was a life-altering storm waiting to hit our house. I replied with a thumbs up, but what I wanted to say was, "I've got you." When they got back, Lana looked exhausted, but less panicked. Aunt Rita made us grilled cheese sandwiches, and for the first time in forever, we had a quiet lunch without someone criticizing the way I chewed or asking if Lana had finished her college essay. It felt weird. Good, but weird. Later that evening, Rita sat us both down. "I called your parents this morning," she said to me. "I told them what they did was cruel, and that you're staying here, permanently if you want." I nodded, not ready to say yes out loud, but also not ready to go back. I also told them we'd be having a proper conversation, a family one, soon. Lana looked like she wanted to sink into the floor. "They don't know about me yet." Rita shook her head. "That's yours to share. But I will say this, if they react badly, you're not going back either." "Got it?" Lana nodded slowly. "Got it." The day of the family meeting, I didn't go to school. I couldn't. My stomach was a mess. Rita called out of work too. She said she didn't trust our parents to be calm and she wanted backup if things got ugly. We didn't have to wait long. They showed up 15 minutes early, all dramatic and loud. Mom walked in like she was entering a courtroom she knew she'd win. Dad had that fake smile plastered on the one he used when company came over, and he didn't want them to know he only liked one of his kids. I didn't say anything. Just sat in the corner watching like it was a movie I didn't audition for. Aunt Rita served coffee even though nobody touched it. Then she leaned forward and said, "We're going to talk, and you're going to listen." What followed was the emotional equivalent of a slow-motion car crash. She started with me how I'd been treated like an afterthought my entire life. The birthdays, the blame games, the obvious favoritism. Mom rolled her eyes at first, but Dad went stiff. You could see it landing, slowly, like he was only just realizing this wasn't a phase. This was a pattern. Lana kept her head down the whole time, until Rita turned to her and said, "And now she has something to tell you." Lana took a deep breath, pulled out the ultrasound photo, set it on the table like a grenade. "I'm pregnant," she said, barely louder than a whisper. The silence was violent. Then Mom stood up, fast, like the word itself was a slap. "What? You're joking. Please tell me you're joking." Dad stayed seated, jaw clenched, staring at the blurry black and white image like it could talk. "Who was all he said?" Tyrese, Lana replied. "The kid from my physics class. That punk with the braids," he barked. "That kid barely speaks." "You let him." "Don't," Lana snapped. "Don't say something you can't take back." Aunt Rita stood up. "That's enough. Both of you." She looked at my parents like they were children. "You kicked one child out. Now you're about to lose the other. I suggest you choose your next words very carefully." Mom sat down again, this time quieter. "What are you going to do?" she asked, still not looking at Lana directly. "I don't know yet," Lana said, "but I'm not doing anything just because it makes you more comfortable." That felt like a slap in its own way. And I respected it. I watched Dad struggle. He opened his mouth, closed it, then finally said, "So what, you're just going to throw away your future?" "No," Lana said calmly. "I'm trying to take control of it." For the first time. They didn't say much after that, just nodded like their entire framework for what family meant had been rattled. They didn't apologize, not that day. But they didn't explode either. And in our house, that was a win. After they left, Aunt Rita sat down and sighed so loud it felt like she released a decade's worth of tension. Well, she said that could have gone worse. I looked at Lana. She looked at me. And for the first time since I'd been kicked out, we both smiled. Not because everything was okay, but because maybe, just maybe, we weren't doing this alone. After that meeting, something shifted. Not like a dramatic movie twist, but more like a slow rewiring. The kind that sneaks up on you. Mom didn't cry. Dad didn't yell. But for once, they didn't fight back either. It was strange. I kept waiting for the other shoe to drop, for someone to call me ungrateful or scream that I ruined Lana's birthday with my existence. But nothing. Just silence. The kind that hums in your ears even after everyone's left. Back at Aunt Rita's, Lana collapsed onto the couch like she'd been holding her breath the entire time. "Do you think they heard us?" she asked, not really expecting an answer. I just shrugged and tossed her a blanket. I think they heard something. Maybe not everything, but it's a start. That night, we didn't talk much. We watched a rerun of some cooking show and fell asleep halfway through. I woke up with her head resting on my shoulder, and for the first time in a while, I didn't feel like a background character in my own family. The next few days felt like calm after a storm. Temporary, sure, but real. Rita started checking in more often, asking about school meals if we needed anything. She was the kind of adult who didn't force hugs or lectures, just existed as proof that not all grown-ups disappoint you. Lana had another appointment lined up for the weekend, this time for an ultrasound. I offered to go, but she said she wanted to do it alone. I need to face it head on, she told me. But you'll be the first person I call. That Saturday, I watched from the apartment window as she climbed into the Uber. I could see her fidgeting with the hem of her sleeve through the tinted glass. When she returned 2 hours later, her face looked different, like she had made a decision but hadn't shared it with her mouth yet. She walked in, dropped her purse, and handed me a folded photo. "That's her," she said quietly. "A girl." I stared at the blurry image, not really knowing what I was looking at, but feeling the weight of it anyway. "She's going to have your stubborn streak," I said, smiling. Lana chuckled, but it came out watery. "She already kicks, like she owns the place." Then her face sobered again. "Jay, I think I want to keep her." She looked at me like she was expecting judgment. "I know I'm young. I know it'll be hard. But every time I try to picture the other options, I just can't." I nodded slowly. "Then that's what we do. We figure it out." That became the new theme, figuring it out. We had conversations we never imagined we'd be having. About diapers, daycare school, how we'd split chores. Rita never pushed, never hovered. Just sat in the background, always ready to catch us if we stumbled too hard. Lana texted Tyrese a few days later. The father. I only knew him as the kid with quiet eyes and big headphones who sat 2 rows behind me in chemistry. He didn't reply immediately. For a day and a half, Lana kept checking her phone every 5 minutes, pretending she wasn't. Then came the call. She stepped outside to take it. I watched from the kitchen, trying not to eavesdrop, but failing. 20 minutes later, she came back in, face pale but determined. "He wants to talk. He wants to be part of it," she said simply. I didn't say anything, just handed her a glass of water and a peanut butter granola bar. Because what else do you do when your sister's life is turning inside out and she's trying to be brave about it? Tyrese came over the next day. He stood on the doormat like he expected someone to throw a chair at him. When I opened the door, he straightened his hoodie and said, "Hi. We know who you are," I interrupted. "Shoes off. We have rules here." It broke the tension. He laughed nervously and stepped inside. Lana sat him down on the couch. Aunt Rita stayed in her room, giving them space but leaving the door open. Smart woman. They talked for over an hour. Low voices, serious expressions. At one point, Lana cried. At another, Tyrese held her hand. When they were done, she walked him to the door. He turned to me before leaving. "I'm not bailing," he said. "I don't know what I'm doing, but I'm not running away." I respected that. I also knew we'd see if it held. Later that night, Rita sat us both down again. She had a way of making serious talks feel like safety nets, not interrogations. "Whatever happens next," she said, "you both have people in your corner." That matters more than anything." I nodded. Lana stared at the floor and whispered, "Mom's going to lose her mind when she finds out I'm keeping the baby." Then we let her, Rita said. "We can't control her storm, but we can decide not to get caught in it." That line stuck with me. The next time we saw our parents was 3 days later. They invited us over for dinner. "A fresh start," Mom had said in the voicemail. "Let's try to move forward." We didn't trust it, not fully, but we agreed. Aunt Rita came with us. No way were we walking into that house without armor. The living room was spotless, like someone had read an article called How to Clean for Forgiveness. There was even music playing softly. Jazz, which no one in our family had ever willingly chosen. Mom hugged Lana first, then turned to me a little hesitant, like she wasn't sure if I'd flinch. I didn't. But I didn't hug back either. Not yet. Dinner was awkward. They'd made everyone's favorite dishes, even mine, which shocked me. We talked about school, college, books. They even asked Lana how she was feeling, which, again, totally out of character. But the tension was always there, like a tight string pulled across the room. Eventually, Lana cleared her throat. "I'm keeping her," she said. Dad's fork froze midair. Mom blinked once, twice, then smiled too widely. "We support you," she said. But her voice cracked at the edges. "We'll help however we can." It didn't sound like a lie, but it didn't feel fully true either. When we left, none of us spoke until we were back in Rita's car. "That felt fake," Lana muttered. "Not all of it," I said. "But yeah, they're trying. Doesn't mean they get it right." Rita drove in silence for a moment, then said, "It's not about them being perfect. It's about whether they're willing to be better. You don't owe them a single ounce of your peace just because they're your parents." Lana leaned her head against the window. "What if they only support me now because they're scared of losing me?" "Then they'll have to learn to support you even when they're not scared," I replied. "Or they'll lose us anyway." That night, as I lay on the pull-out couch staring at the ceiling, I realized something had changed. Not just in them, in me. I wasn't waiting for their apology anymore. I wasn't looking for their approval. I was building a life where their presence was optional. They could either grow into people I could trust again, or they could watch from a distance. Either way, I wasn't going back to being invisible. 2 weeks passed, and the world didn't collapse. That in itself felt like a miracle. No explosive phone calls, no midnight lectures, no ambush visits. Our parents had entered a strange, almost suspicious phase, acting like everything was normal while avoiding anything that wasn't. And honestly, that was fine with me. Silence was better than sabotage. Lana's pregnancy started showing in small ways. She moved a little slower, napped more often, and started developing intense cravings for orange soda and crunchy ice. Aunt Rita kept her stocked with both like it was sacred medicine. Meanwhile, Tyrese showed up every weekend like clockwork. He didn't always have the right words, most teenage boys don't, but he was there. He listened. He asked questions. He even offered to get a part-time job. Lana turned him down the first time. "You've got your own life to figure out," she said. "This baby isn't a punishment, it's just a shift, and we'll figure it out together." But he came back the next day with a grocery bag full of prenatal vitamins and stretch mark cream anyway. It wasn't about fixing everything, it was about trying. Then came the school meeting. Lana's counselor had requested a conference to discuss academic planning. Translation: "We heard you're pregnant and don't want you tanking our numbers." Rita went with her. I stayed behind, pacing the apartment like a dog during fireworks. When they returned, Lana looked surprisingly okay. "They weren't cruel," she said. "Just clueless." Kept using words like alternative path and realistic expectations. Rita scoffed. "No one ever says that to boys who become fathers at 16. Funny how that works." We didn't laugh, but we all understood. Lana dropped 2 of her harder electives, switched to part-time for the semester, and started online modules from home. It wasn't ideal, but it was hers. I started spending more time at the library, diving deep into college applications. My grades had always been decent, but now I was obsessed. Not to escape, though, maybe that was part of it, but to prove something. That I wasn't just the forgotten daughter, that I could build a future out of scraps. Aunt Rita noticed. She started waking me up early on Saturdays with coffee and quiet encouragement. She never pushed, never pressured, just showed up with presence. The kind of parenting that doesn't need words to work. I hadn't realized how rare that was until I felt it for real. Then came the ultrasound appointment. The big one. The one where they tell you if everything looks okay. Lana asked all of us to come, me, Tyrese, and Rita. She said she needed her circle. We packed into the little exam room, hearts thudding like drums. When the image popped up on the screen, everything went silent. Not out of fear, out of awe. There she was, a tiny, squirming human. Our niece. Tyrese teared up. Rita squeezed Lana's hand. I just stared, trying to memorize every shadow and curve. It was no longer a theoretical future. It was real. She was real. Her heart looked strong, the doctor said, smiling. So does her mama's. The car ride home was quiet in the best way. The kind where everyone's processing something sacred. We got takeout that night, greasy burgers and milkshakes per Lana's request, and watched a movie none of us paid attention to. At some point, Lana leaned her head on my shoulder and whispered, "I'm terrified, but I think I'm ready." I didn't respond right away. I just nodded and let the moment be what it was. A few days later, our parents called again. This time, they invited all of us to dinner, including Tyrese. That part shocked me. Mom had always been weirdly formal about appearances, and Dad didn't talk to boys who wore hoodies indoors. But they asked. So, we accepted. We dressed up more than we needed to, like we were going to court instead of a kitchen. Tyrese wore a button-up shirt he clearly hated. Lana braided her hair back tight like armor. I wore black because it felt safe. When we walked in, the table was already set. Mom had made roast chicken and cornbread comfort food. I smelled apple pie baking in the oven. Dad greeted Tyrese with a handshake that was too firm to be casual, but too short to be aggressive. Progress, I guess. Dinner started tense, but civil. They asked Tyrese about school. He answered respectfully. They asked about his plans. He said he was applying for a part-time job at the rec center. Dad raised an eyebrow, but nodded. "At least you're thinking ahead," he said, which was in his language a compliment. Then came the real moment. Mom cleared her throat and looked at Lana. "We've been talking, your father and I, and we want to help. Financially, with the baby. We know we haven't earned your trust back, but we want to try." Lana blinked slowly. "What's the catch?" "No catch," Mom said quickly. "Just conditions." Rita leaned in, eyebrows raised. "Let's hear them." "We want her to live here after the baby's born." Mom said, her voice small. "At least for the first few months, so we can help." Lana looked like someone had just dumped cold water on her. "You want me to come back?" "Like nothing happened." "Not like nothing happened," Dad said, "but maybe like something new can happen." I felt the heat rise behind my ears. So she gets her room back now that she's having a child. But when she just wanted space, you kicked me out to give it to her, and now you want to play support system. The room went silent. Mom looked down. Dad stared at his plate. "Jalen," Mom said softly, "you're right. And I'm sorry. You deserved more. We didn't see it then, but we see it now. It's not about apologies," I snapped. "It's about patterns. You didn't just mess up. You built a system where I didn't matter." Rita's voice cut in before things spiraled. "Maybe we don't need a decision tonight. Maybe this is just the beginning of a conversation." Everyone exhaled. The pie timer went off and the spell broke. We finished dessert without further fireworks, but the air was thick with unfinished thoughts. Back at Rita's, Lana sat cross-legged on the couch, cradling her belly. "I don't think I can go back," she said finally. "Not yet. I want their help, but I don't want their control." I understood that completely. "You can build your own rules," I told her. "This is your life now. They either respect it or they watch it from the sidelines." The next morning, Lana made a list. Not a to-do list, a boundary list. Things she needed to feel safe, space, autonomy, emotional safety, and she sent it to Mom. No sugarcoating, just honesty. An hour later, Mom replied, "We want to earn our place in your life. We'll start with listening." And that's how things stayed for a while. Imperfect, messy human. Mom called twice a week. Dad didn't, but he helped drive Tyrese to work when he could. Lana finished her trimester strong. I got into 3 colleges. Aunt Rita renewed her lease and turned the tiny guest closet into a mini nursery. Life wasn't perfect, but it was ours. We were learning, slowly, together. The first signs came soft, like a tide creeping back after pretending to behave. My parents had been on their best behavior for months, checking in, offering help, even suggesting baby names that Lana politely ignored. It was a slow dance of diplomacy, and we all tiptoed around old bruises, hoping they wouldn't swell again. But bruises, like bad habits, always find their way back. It started with a text. Mom asking Lana to consider having the baby shower at their house. More space, she said. And the whole family can come. On the surface, it seemed reasonable, but I could see Lana's body tighten when she read it. I knew what she was thinking, that more space meant more control, and whole family meant relatives who still pretended I was invisible. She didn't reply right away. We sat in the living room, warm light spilling in from Rita's tiny windows, the quiet hum of a ceiling fan spinning above us. I was on my laptop, finalizing my FAFSA forms. Lana stared at the screen. "Should I even go?" she asked. "It's your baby. Your call," I said without looking up. But I wouldn't trust them to host a bake sale, let alone something that matters. She nodded slowly, like she'd already decided and was just waiting for someone to validate it. "I'll do it here," she said. "Small, safe, people who get it." And that's what we did. The baby shower wasn't flashy. No Instagram-worthy decorations or 20-person guest list. Just Lana's closest friends, Aunt Rita's coworkers, Tyrese's mom, and me. We filled the apartment with streamers and dollar store banners, set out bowls of fruit and baked cupcakes until the place smelled like a dream. Someone brought tiny pink socks and baby lotion. Someone else brought a stack of used parenting books. Lana opened each gift with gratitude that felt more like reverence. She was glowing, not just the hormonal kind, but something deeper earned through surviving fire. Tyrese hovered near her all afternoon, like her shadow, attentive but not possessive. I stood by the doorway watching the whole thing with a strange ache in my chest. Near the end, Lana grabbed my wrist and whispered, "Can you sneak out and grab the folder from my bag?" Confused, I did what she asked. When I returned, she stood in the middle of the room holding up a sonogram and the envelope I'd just handed her. "This," she said, lifting the picture, "is Bonnie J. Williams, named after the woman who saved my life." She looked at Aunt Rita. Everyone turned to her. I watched her try not to cry, but the dam cracked when Lana continued. "And this," she held up the envelope, "is for my sister. Because without her, I wouldn't have had the courage to say no or yes or anything in between." She passed it to me. Inside was a handwritten letter and a college application fee receipt. "Already paid," Lana said. "No excuses." I laughed, trying not to cry in front of strangers. But something in me melted right there. Not because of the gesture, but because someone had planned for my future without making it about themselves. That night, after everyone left and the apartment was littered with crumpled tissue paper and half-eaten cake, I sat beside Lana on the pull-out couch. "You're gonna be an incredible mom," I said. She smirked. "If I survive labor." "That part sucks," Aunt Rita chimed in from the kitchen. "But it's worth it. Even when they scream like banshees and throw applesauce at your face." We all laughed. The air was light for once, but light never lasts forever. 3 days later, Dad showed up. No warning, no text. Just knocked on the door with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Lana was napping. I answered. "Hey, Jay," he said, like we were old friends. Thought I'd check in. Can I come in? I didn't move. About what? Just wanted to talk. Haven't seen you two in a while. I crossed my arms. We've been busy. He looked past me like he expected to see a crib or a crying baby. I get that. I just thought maybe we could reconnect, you and me. Or I could help with something. Take Lana to her appointments, maybe. We're fine, I said quickly. Too quickly. Aunt Rita's got it covered. He hesitated. Right, of course. Still, I miss you girls. That did something weird in my chest. The guilt reflex, the one they trained in us since childhood. Maybe next week, I said softer. We're kind of swamped. Yeah, he nodded, stepping back. Sure thing. Just don't shut me out, okay? After he left, I stood there for a long time. Door still open, heart too. I hated that he could still stir emotions in me with so little effort. Lana woke up and asked what happened. I told her. She didn't say anything for a while. Then they don't want us. They want control. There's a difference. And I couldn't argue. A week later, Lana's ankles were the size of grapefruits, and her moods switched every 15 minutes. She was tired, done, ready. I helped her install the car seat with instructions that may as well have been written in Klingon. Tyrese brought over a suitcase full of newborn clothes and diapers he bought with his first paycheck. Aunt Rita stocked the fridge like a doomsday prepper. We were nesting. Except it wasn't birds and twigs, it was women and willpower bracing for impact. And impact came. On a Tuesday night, Lana screamed from the bathroom and I found her gripping the counter, eyes wild. My water broke. The ride to the hospital was a blur of panic and potholes. Rita drove like she was fleeing a crime scene. Tyrese met us in the lobby. We rushed Lana into triage where they confirmed what we already knew: it was go time. The labor was slow at first, then brutal. She screamed, she cursed, she cried. Tyrese nearly fainted twice. I held her hand so long my fingers went numb. Nurses came and went. Machines beeped. Hours passed like years. Rita stayed in the waiting room, texting updates to everyone and pacing like a general on the edge of war. Then after 16 hours and 2 moments where I thought she'd kill someone, Lana pushed. And pushed. And then suddenly Bonnie arrived. She wasn't loud, just a tiny cry, more like a question than a statement. But in that moment, everything else disappeared. She was perfect, squishy, red-faced, and absolutely perfect. They laid her on Lana's chest, and I watched my sister sob in this raw, primal way. Not from pain, from arrival. From finally holding proof that something beautiful could come out of all the chaos. Tyrese cried too. He kissed Lana's forehead like she was glass. The nurse handed me the baby, and I stared into those barely open eyes and whispered, "Welcome to the storm. You've got warriors now." We stayed in that hospital room for 2 days. My parents visited on the second afternoon. They came quietly, carrying flowers and guilt. They didn't ask to hold Bonnie. They waited until Lana offered. "She's beautiful," Mom whispered. "She looks like all of you." Dad nodded. "You did good, Lana. Both of you." We didn't say much else. They left after an hour. That was enough. Back at Rita's, everything felt different. Not worse, not better, just heavier. The air carried responsibility now. We were officially a village with a baby at the center, and we wouldn't break. The first night home with Bonnie was quiet, but not in a peaceful way. It was the kind of quiet where everything feels like it's holding its breath. Lana sat upright on the couch, cradling Bonnie in her arms, afraid to move, like the slightest shift might break this fragile little thing. Tyrese stood nearby, trying to look calm but clearly panicking under the surface. I sat cross-legged on the floor, phone in hand, searching baby forums for answers to questions we hadn't even formed yet. Rita moved through the apartment like muscle memory, changing sheets, heating bottles, whispering reassurance like spells. "You're doing fine," she said without looking up. "She's breathing." "You're breathing. That's the job." By the third night, Bonnie screamed like it was her full-time job. Nothing calmed her. Not milk, not swaddling, not walking in slow circles at 2 in the morning. Tyrese had bags under his eyes so deep they looked permanent. Lana was too tired to cry. I tried everything, singing, whispering, even dancing like a fool, but the crying continued like an alarm that only stopped when she finally passed out from exhaustion, leaving us dazed and terrified. "What if we're not cut out for this?" Lana asked one night, rocking back and forth with Bonnie in her lap. "You are," I told her. "You already are. She just hasn't figured it out yet. Babies are slow learners." That made her smile for the first time in hours. The weeks rolled forward like foggy days in a new season. Lana healed slowly. Bonnie grew fast. We learned her patterns, the little gasping hiccup right before she cried the way she hated baths, but loved being swaddled, how she only calmed when Lana hummed that one stupid commercial jingle from her childhood. Tyrese found a rhythm changing diapers like a pro and whispering promises to Bonnie about all the things they'd do one day. "We'll go to the park, ride bikes. I'll teach you how to throw a curveball even if you suck at it." Lana rolled her eyes but smiled every time. Rita adjusted her life like she'd been preparing for this her whole existence. She rearranged her work schedule, bought blackout curtains, and learned to nap like a soldier between baby wails. Sometimes late at night, I'd find her sitting on the couch with Bonnie asleep on her chest, both of them breathing in sync. I didn't say anything, just stood there and memorized the peace of that moment. My parents kept their distance mostly, which was strange because for years all I wanted was for them to pull closer. Now that they were finally learning how, I wasn't sure if I wanted to let them. Mom sent meals every weekend, not store-bought, actual homemade food. Dishes I didn't even know she could cook. Stews, casseroles, banana bread with too much cinnamon. Each container had a note handwritten, always the same message: "I hope this helps." It didn't erase the past, but it didn't try to. That mattered. Dad started attending therapy. Not just the family sessions, but solo appointments too. At first, I thought it was performative, another trick. But something about his silence in those sessions, the way he listened instead of deflecting, made me reconsider. He wasn't perfect, still too proud, still got defensive. But every now and then he'd drop the act and just be a man trying to make sense of what he'd broken. During one session, he looked right at me and said, "I used to think strength meant control. Now I think it means listening when it's hardest." I didn't respond. I just nodded. That was enough. Lana and I had made a pact. Give them a trial. Let them prove they could be different. But we also promised each other we'd walk away again if they slipped. That pact kept us steady like a safety net made of years of shared pain. Bonnie hit 3 months with a tiny giggle that could melt stone. She'd grab fingers, drool constantly, and somehow make the whole apartment feel like a warm, chaotic haven. Lana had enrolled in online college classes one at a time and slowly chipped away at her future. Tyrese found a steady job at a shipping warehouse and saved every extra dollar. Rita bought a bigger couch. I kept up with school, earned a scholarship, and finally picked a major psychology. I wanted to understand people, not to forgive them, but to outgrow them. One Sunday, Mom asked if we could come to dinner. No expectations, just food and conversation. Lana looked at me across the table. I raised one eyebrow. She sighed. "Okay, one dinner." So we went. Bonnie wore a yellow onesie that said "Future Queen" and a headband that was too big for her tiny head. Mom greeted us at the door with nervous energy, Dad behind her with a shy smile. The house smelled like roast chicken and cinnamon rolls. For once, nothing felt forced. Dinner was awkward at first. Bonnie fussed. Tyrese hovered. Mom tried too hard. Dad didn't try enough. But halfway through, Bonnie burped so loudly, everyone laughed. And just like that, the ice cracked. Rita made a joke about baby farts. Lana rolled her eyes. Dad offered to do dishes. Mom asked Lana about her online classes and didn't flinch when she mentioned Tyrese. No passive-aggressive remarks, no hidden daggers. just curiosity. After dessert, Mom brought out a photo album, one I hadn't seen in years. Inside were pictures of me and Lana as kids dressed up for Halloween, playing in the backyard, making weird faces at the camera. I hadn't even known these existed. She turned the pages slowly, stopping at one where I was holding a stick like a sword, and Lana was hiding behind me. "You always protected her," she said softly, "even when you were the one who needed protection." I didn't know what to say, so I didn't say anything. But I felt something loosen in my chest. Not forgiveness. Not yet. But something close to peace. The night ended without drama. No guilt trips, no grand gestures. Just tired parents saying goodbye at the door, their eyes a little softer than before. On the way home, Bonnie fell asleep in her car seat. Lana looked over at me and said, "Do you think they've really changed?" I thought about it for a long time. Then I think they're trying. And for once, that might be enough. Back at the apartment, Rita was already asleep on the new couch. Tyrese carried Bonnie inside, careful not to wake her. Lana took off her shoes and flopped onto the floor. "We made it," she whispered. I nodded. Yeah, we did. Later that night, I sat by the window and stared out into the quiet street. Life didn't feel perfect, but it felt ours. Not something given, but something claimed. I looked down at Bonnie sleeping in her bassinet, her tiny hand curled into a fist like she was ready to fight the world. And I smiled, because she wouldn't have to, not alone. She'd grow up surrounded by women who knew what survival looked like, by men who chose gentleness over power, by a family that learned to grow roots after the quake. And when she was old enough, we'd tell her the whole story. Not just the good parts, not just the pain, but all of it. So she'd understand where she came from, and why she'd never have to wonder if she was loved. The past didn't disappear, but we outgrew it. Together. Story 2. Hi, I'm Delara. On my birthday, I brought a homemade cake to my parents' house, only to watch them hand my sister the keys to a brand new home. They didn't even say happy birthday. Not one gift, not one glance. But here's what they didn't know: the lottery ticket. I got inside their present bag. The value of the one they never opened went beyond money. Everything was revealed. Tell me what time and location you're listening from before we get started. I'd love to know, because this story, it starts with silence and ends with something they could never buy. I woke up to the familiar creak of my ceiling fan and the pale light slipping through the cheap blinds I still hadn't replaced. No singing, no knock at the door, no birthday text from Mom. Just the hum of the refrigerator and a soft egg I tried to ignore. I turned over and reached for my phone, half expecting a message. Anything but the lock screen just showed the date, my birthday, a Tuesday, and not a single notification from the people who were supposed to remember me. Growing up, birthdays were always a shared event. Me and Serafino, 2 years apart, but always treated like one person when it came to cake and candles. But once she hit her influencer stride, the shared part disappeared. Just like the attention, I rolled out of bed and shuffled into the kitchen, letting the silence settle around me like old dust. The smell of vanilla bean and lemon zest still lingered from last night. The cake sat finished on the counter. My own recipe, light lemony, built with patience and sugar. I'd made it for them. I told myself it didn't matter whether they remembered, but part of me still hoped. After a peaceful breakfast and a short shower, I packaged the cake gently, folding the edges of the wax paper as if it were something sacred. I didn't bother dressing up. Just pants and a beautiful blue blouse, the type of attire no one notices. I drove the 15 minutes to my parents' place with the cake seat belted alongside me like a vulnerable passenger. Their driveway was crowded. I paused. Mom hadn't spoken about visitors. I let me ponder for a bit. A surprise for me, perhaps. However, I could hear the chuckling as I moved in closer. Bright practiced the voice of Sarah Finn. All of this was not necessary for you to accomplish. Is that champagne, my God? I froze when I entered through the open front door. and big canvas banner, helium balloons touching the ceiling, and gold and white streamers adorned the living area. Sarah Finn, welcome home. In the center of it all was her, as radiant as ever. Posing with the ideal astonished look while holding a phone, a little group had assembled, neighbors and relatives, the manager of her brand. Beside her, holding a glass of wine, was my mother. Dad was grinning. I cleared my throat. Nobody took attention. With the cake still in hand, I made my way to the kitchen and softly set it in the buffet table's corner next to a tower of store-bought cupcakes that were adorned with edible glitter and Sarah Finn's initials. Oh dear, Dolores. At last, Mom spotted me. She approached, just brushing across my shoulder. Are you able to assist with the picture? A group shot is what we're doing. I started to say something. With a smile that stopped short of her eyes, she interrupted me. Drama is not needed just now. I took a deep breath, snapped the picture from behind the lens of the camera that was left on the counter. I saw my father take something out of his pocket, a bright brass key. This is for you, my love, he said. A new location, 3 rooms, yours alone. Cheers broke out in the room. I continued to take photos. I have mechanical hands. Like always, my cake faded into the background as it sat undisturbed in the corner. A toast was called for. I turned away and sought a place by the table to transform into a child while breathing through my nose. After hurrying by me, one of Serafina's friend's kids nipped the buffet's corner. After teetering, the cake box fell. It made a wet, soft sound. Final. Instinctively, I bent down to collect the fragments, my hands trembling. Like a spilled attempt, the icing spread all over the tile. The middle of one layer was completely cracked. Mom sighed as she glanced over. That's why honey we purchase from experts. Nobody volunteered to assist. Nobody even made a move. I slowly got to my feet, gripping the box as if it were dead. The throng had dispersed. More pictures, more compliments. It came with me and my dessert, ignored. I kicked off my shoes at the door of my apartment. The flat was still warm from the morning's baking. I opened the freezer, relocated a bag of peas, and made space. I put the shattered cake inside as if it were worth preserving. The same recipe. Less sugar next time. I continued to gaze at the closed freezer door, then made their way to my tiny kitchen table. I took out the lottery ticket envelope I had hidden in my handbag that morning. I hadn't felt like giving them a present. They didn't know what else I had done that day, but I departed with a cake that nobody wanted on my own birthday. When I came home, I didn't weep. Unlike in my 20s, when everything seemed to be falling apart, I didn't yell, hurl things, or pace my little apartment above the laundry room. After removing my shoes and placing the box with the damaged cake on the counter, I simply stood there and listened to the distant buzz of dryers spinning downstairs. The spring rain had begun by the time it was nearly 7. There was a gentle, continuous drizzle that tapped against the windows like an old lullaby, not a storm. It was the type that left you feeling more alone than thunder could. On the burner, my food remained unfinished. Lasagna that has been reheated. I wasn't hungry. My body was still full of that empty type of agony, like I'd eaten stillness all day. And now it was growing in my chest. I had brought leftovers from the party, and they were piled high on the kitchen table. 2 envelopes, a couple scones, and some partially consumed cookies. Earlier that morning, I had placed cards in Mom and Dad's present bags. They weren't even signed by me, merely scratch-off tickets. Not very fancy, just a small joke. Tucked within sparkly cardboard is a little wish. Not even they had opened them. I took a seat. One envelope sat next to the other, still neatly sealed, as if it had never been touched as my fingertips moved down its edge. The last ticket I had in my handbag as a backup was the one I picked up. Today, I didn't intend to scratch it. It was meant to be a backup card in case theirs all turned out to be a bust-in if someone responded, "Nice try," and laughed. Here's another thing I was going to say. This one could be the winner. Isn't it funny I had intended to perform my final miracle for them? Curled up a bit from the warmth of my purse, it was now in my hand. I took a quarter out of the drawer and began to scratch it. A repeat of a cooking show muttered on the TV as they went through the motions without really thinking. 3 digits that match. I stopped and leaned in. Once more 3 digits match. I gazed. $120,000. It took a while for my hand to shake. My brain needed a moment to catch up for a breath to catch. My heart is telling me to wait. Did that just happen? I blinked. Checked once more. Looked up the code on the back on Google. Twice. It was authentic. That ticket was like something radioactive in my palm as I sat there in silence. I could sense its heat. Perhaps the blood rushing to my face was the cause. For a long time, I was not happy. Not even a sense of relief. There was only an odd quiet, as if the entire universe had stopped to ask me one question. What comes next? It wasn't a noble initial idea. No, it wasn't. I should still give it to them, I suppose. It was a moment of intuition. Get out, keep safe. Then, however, my conscience formed over decades of Sunday sermons and family dinners whispered, you promised to give it to them every time. It would be a gift for the entire family if it hit that. On their birthday, however, families don't abandon their daughters, do they? They don't give a house to the golden child and ask someone else to take a photo. They don't sigh as if you were a burden in the first place and throw away the cake you spent the entire night making. They don't ask you to keep quiet and then never remember that you ever said anything. My gaze returned to the garbage can beneath the sink. I could still hear my mother's voice. We purchase from experts because of this. I glanced at the ticket once more. Only a gift counts, I said out loud. You're worth being believed in by someone. I carefully folded the ticket, put it in a pristine envelope, and tucked it into my top drawer along with my passport, expired coupons, and that picture of Serafina and me on a tire swing as children. I then went to the trash and threw in the 2 unopened envelopes that I had taken from the table. When they landed, there was not even a sound, only the faint sound of paper rustling, hitting paper. At the end of some things, it's really that quiet. I took a sticky note out of the refrigerator and wrote on it. Perhaps it's time to start living like it's a new year if nobody remembers your birthday. I gazed at it after placing it on the cabinet above the sink. It wasn't particularly deep, but it was the most open thing I had spoken aloud in weeks. I made tea that I wasn't particularly interested in after clearing the table. I opened my laptop and entered search terms into the bar. Apartments outside of Charlotte that are affordable. My Wi-Fi is still performing strangely, and the listings loaded slowly. I then clicked on another tab. Culinary programs for adults, perhaps. Asheville, I mumbled. Or Durham, somewhere with air that doesn't smell like detergent and sorrow. I hesitated, thought about notifying them, but I didn't go for my phone. I didn't open the family group chat that Seraphine controlled with her links and her filtered photographs and her statements about living consciously. I didn't compose a text to my mom, since the reality was they wouldn't notice if I went. And maybe that's why I had to. That night, I made 2 decisions. I would retain the ticket, and I would depart without notifying anyone. I didn't sleep much after that night. Some individuals stay up planning retribution. I remained up looking for culinary certifications and apartment leases. I packed what little I had in 10 days, signed a lease for a small Asheville apartment, and left notice at the bakery. Just 1 room. The kitchen is hardly large enough to turn around in, and the ceilings are slanted. It did, however, have one thing that my childhood house did not. Quiet. It didn't hurt. The early morning buses down the hill and the occasional above neighbor hauling furniture at unimaginable hours were the only sounds. It didn't bother me either. I was somewhere new, they reminded me. Somewhere I own. The birthday had been 2 weeks ago. It wasn't. Mom had texted me once, but I hadn't responded. I heard you went out of town. I hope you're not being overly dramatic once more. I saw Dad's missed call and disregarded the voicemail, but he didn't text at all. I could picture its words. You ought to have remained, or something like that. Your sister truly needed your assistance in organizing the thank you messages. Saturday was the day. For my culinary class assignment, which involved purchasing local vegetables from the farmer's market, I got up early. The rain had stopped, and a mild, foggy morning had taken its place. I put a little notepad under my arm, curled my locks back, and wore my apron over trousers. I was surprised to see familiar faces. That was the reason we were here. Behind me, I heard a familiar voice as I scanned a stand of heritage carrots. If it's not Eileen's little baker, that is. Slowly, I turned. Sylvia Aunt. She had the same appearance. She wore sunglasses, a flowing scarf, and her silver gray hair in a lazy bun. She was carrying a basket of strawberries and herbs. Delara. Startled, she blinked. "Why are you here?" I struggled to grin. "Hello, the world is little. I was unaware that you had relocated to Asheville. All I needed was a change of scenery." Her level of knowledge was unknown to me. Things best to leave things open-ended. She took a step forward. "Are you working here? I'm enrolled in a culinary school. Long overdue. That's fantastic." She gave a quiet smile. "That would have delighted your grandmother." Eventually, we took a seat at one of the picnic tables that was shaded and close to the coffee cart. I bought her a chamomile black tea myself. I wasn't thinking clearly, but it was too warm for hot beverages. She gave me a prolonged look. "But I guess your mother didn't mention that you moved." "It's been a little stressful. That's one way of putting it." I gave a shrug. Sarah Finn's brand extension, or whatever she's calling it these days, has them completely occupied. Sylvia took a gulp of her tea. "I assumed that the inheritance could have caused you some distress." I blinked. "I apologize." "Which inheritance?" She hesitated. "From your granny, Eileen." My body froze. "You didn't want anything you said, I was told." "No. Serafina was the one I wanted to manage things I couldn't breathe." "Who said that to you?" She seems taken aback by my response. "Mommy, you thought it was preferable if Seraphin continued the family tradition," she added. I put down my cup. "I didn't say that." We were silent for a long time. Then she let out a sigh. The home was given to her. The garden. Eileen had set up a little trust money, I guessed. I got up, though. I had to leave. I was on my way when I said Delara, back at my flat. I did not take a seat. I immediately went to my inbox and opened the old family documents folder that I hadn't looked at in years. A scanned PDF of my grandmother's will from 4 years prior was there. The sentence was read 3 times by me. Serafina and Delara. My granddaughters will each receive an equal share of the inheritance. Nor a maybe, nor a footnote. As clear as day. With my hands shaking on the desk's edge, I sank into my chair. Then I had a memory. Warren Blake, an old friend of Grandma's. He was a lawyer, a reserved guy with kind eyes, and he had a propensity to quote the Bible without being asked. Until she became ill, he took care of her affairs. 2 years prior, I had sent him a holiday card. I still had his number in my contacts. He picked up after the second ring when I phoned. "Blake's home. Blake, Mr. Delara is here. Marin Delara. He sounded kind, yet a little perplexed. "Well, a long time has passed. Have you got a moment? It has to do with my grandmother's property." A pause. "Naturally." I informed him about Sylvia's remarks on the bequest. Concerning Serafina. This time there was a lengthier wait. I recall that a month or so prior to Eileen's death, Serafina and your mother arrived. We completed the revised papers after they said that you had consented to transfer your share. I didn't ever sign anything. My voice was faint as I spoke. Once more he was silent. "I thought you had." After that day, I never saw the original copy again. Only the one they supplied. Soon after my stomach turned Delara, I retired. He started off cautiously. "Is your original still with you? I would advise you to have someone check both to make sure nothing was submitted without the necessary confirmation and to compare dates and signatures." I hung up after spending a considerable amount of time gazing at my phone. My birthday wasn't just forgotten by them. They removed me from a heritage that I had contributed to. Something in me ceased attempting to reason after that phone conversation with Mr. Blake. I refrained from crying. I refrained from screaming. I listened to the soft patter of late spring rain on the window and the hum of the refrigerator while I gazed at the ceiling of my studio apartment. The silence seemed different now, heavier, as if it were trying to tell me something I was afraid to acknowledge. This was no coincidence. This was a trend. I had been peeling back layers of what I had never seen before for 5 weeks after my birthday. My hands were kept occupied by the bread lessons, and I had just enough structure from my nights at the cafe to keep me from collapsing. However, nothing could make the pain of having my own history altered go away, not even fire or flour. The message arrived at around 3 p.m. as I was preparing lemon glaze at my counter on a rainy Tuesday. A text message from my mother's number buzzed through my phone. I picked it up after wiping my fingers on a towel. Do not be concerned about Dalara. She will, as usual, move on. Pay attention to the press release for the introduction of your brand. I spent a lot of time looking at the screen. There is no punctuation. Without hesitation. As usual, I received a simple, informal sentence intended for Seraphine. That's what got stuck in my chest. No, she will go past it. She said it as though it were a quality of mine, even though I had heard that all my life. As if she relied on forgiveness as a weakness. I didn't answer. Even though I couldn't taste anything because of the knot that developed at the back of my throat, I just slid the phone face down on the counter and kept swirling the glaze. The burn occurred at school later that day. Never in my life had I burnt a sauce. It was just butter, wheat, and milk, basic enough. But when I slept off, I allowed it to sit for too long, half a second. Then it suddenly became bitter. My teacher, Marco, saw right away. After lowering the heat, he stepped over and gave me a little prod in the direction of the prep area on the side. Dalara. Silently, he said, "What's happening?" I started to say something to justify it. A long day. Poor sleep. A headache, perhaps. Instead, though, I spoke something I had never said out loud before. I always believed that doing good would be sufficient. I whispered. As it happens, I was meant to be convenient. Marco was silent at first. He only gave a nod. His eyes were steady and compassionate. Your silence is not owed to anyone. I laughed a little hollowly. That was their favorite part. The drizzle had become a persistent deluge by dusk. I was home, hair still damp from the walk back, sipping tepid tea, when I made the mistake of accessing social media. Seraphine's page was sparkling. Legacy. Dinner for Grandma Eileen's Vision read the caption on one carousel of photographs. There was my mother lifting a glass, my father grinning next to Seraphina in a green velvet dress that I'd helped her choose out 2 years earlier for an entirely other occasion. The caption went on to commemorate the upcoming phase of our family's history. I was not in any of the pictures. Not a word. Not even one from the backdrop that is fuzzy. Everything was being rewritten. Not only the will, not just my part, but the story as a whole. This time it wasn't grief. Not even rage was involved. Something bone deep, something frigid. The knowledge that I wasn't just forgotten. That was how they liked it. It was about 8 p.m. when my phone rang. Sylvia, aunt. After hesitating, I took it up. Hello, I said. A pause occurred. Then her voice sounded guarded and quiet. Dalara, I wanted to see how you were doing. I'm all right, I said, a falsehood. I looked at a few of the photos. I had no idea what they had planned. Your mother was surprised when you found out. She doesn't generally. I spoke, attempting to maintain a steady tone. A little stillness fell. Then I heard something unexpected from Sylvia. Evelyn once told me that she felt bad about the way she handled things with you. However, it was always done after the event, when you weren't there to hear it every time. I shut my eyes. She did, of course, I muttered. When no one is around to hear it, regret is safe. Dalara, she has always relied on me to not resist. I spoke to myself more often than to her. I hung up after thanking Sylvia. The flat was soon silent once more. I didn't mind it now, though. From beneath the bed, I took out a spiral-bound notebook that I had begun to reuse after using it for class notes. I started sending Grandma's lawyer an email to confirm the disparity. Mom texted, "Dalara's social media posts shouldn't concern you." Serafini referred to it as her grandmother's legacy. I'm not mentioned on a new page. I only wrote a single phrase. They anticipate my silent disappearance. Silence is strategy this time, though. No major confrontations, no big speeches, just evidence, proof, and purpose. I was going to be heard, but I wasn't going to yell. They expected me to discreetly vanish as soon as I finished writing that phrase. Silence is strategy this time, though. The refrigerator was open. I wasn't hungry. All I needed to do was do something with my hands. Something easy. Something rooted. I ran my fingertips over a jar of thyme that I had purchased the previous weekend at the farmer's market. When you're building layers, add thyme, Grandma used to say. It lingers, but doesn't shout. She did it that way. Never loud or ostentatious, but always memorable when you listened. At culinary school, Marco gave us a family recipe challenge the next morning. Don't simply copy. Develop something from scratch. Rethink. I didn't have to think long. Grandma Eileen's roast. She used to prepare it every second Sunday. The fragrance of garlic and molasses wafted through the hallways long before the first slice ever struck the plate. I remembered the way she used to crane her head as she stirred, singing something off-tune while I peeled vegetables. I didn't want to copy it this time, though. I wanted to be honest about it. I substituted cumin and a pinch of smoky paprika for the sweetness. Darker, deeper, pushed the sear. I let the natural juices do the talking instead of using honey glaze. Before glazing, let the quiet linger in the pan for one more second. The room was silent when Marco took his first bite. He put his fork down and turned to face me. It's more like someone witnessing things snap into place than a teacher. "This is not nostalgia," he muttered. "Something else is involved." I gave a nod. It's who I could have become if I wasn't constantly playing it safe. He then informed me of the incident. An invitation-only industry taste where cooks showcase a single meal to a group of possible investors. Over the course of a single evening, names are formed in a location where restaurateurs listen and legacy mentors guide. "Come on in," he said. "Show this." I blinked. "Do you believe I'm prepared?" He grinned. "This has nothing to do with preparedness, Dalara. It's all about visibility." My throat constricted. I glanced at the dish once more. Almost casually, he added, "You must use your true name while registering. They must be aware of the presenter." My first instinct was to say no. In my mind, I could practically hear my mother's voice. She's not the kind to crave attention. And then Seraphine's favorite dig. She's too sensitive for pressure. I shook my head slowly. If they find out I'm coming, they'll make sure I don't. Marco didn't push, simply stated, "Then give them a chance." Back at my flat that evening, behind a fading index card with roast notes scrawled in the margins, I took out Grandma's old recipe box, the one I'd kept hidden since the day they gave Seraphine the house keys and stuffed my cake in the garbage. It was a little folded fragment that I discovered. The silent one could clearly read her handwriting. "Your quiet will one day speak louder than theirs ever could." I gasped. 5 times I read it again. She had spotted me even when no one else had. I switched on my laptop and went up the registration page. Name Dolores Eileen Marin. I didn't flinch when I typed it. When the confirmation email came through, I glanced at it for a minute before sending a single message to Aunt Sylvia. "I'm presenting Grandma's roast next Friday. You're welcome, but don't tell them. No exclamation point or emoji, just the facts." I began drawing plating concepts in my prep notebook the next day. This time, I wanted to provide more than just a dinner, not because I needed them for class. On the 3rd page, I wanted to provide clarification. I highlighted one element that my mother never used, but that my grandmother constantly mentioned: Not once. Cloves. It was too antiquated, she said. Claimed that it overwhelmed everything. However, I had the roast with it for the first time and recalled how my grandmother had once looked at me when I was 12. You can taste the difference, she inquired. I gave a nod. It's bold because of that, she had stated. It's yours because of it. Now I whispered out loud. They will taste what they never dared to serve this time. I wasn't hiding from them, but I also wasn't doing it for them. And I didn't give a damn about anybody else knew. As soon as I entered the kitchen that morning, I should have seen something was off. Marco was already tense. As though preparing for contact, his sleeves were rolled halfway and his jaw was taut. He didn't say hello to me as usual. No quick grief, no nod. Rather, he muttered something under his breath while pointing to the clipboard and the inspector's hands. Get ready. The white-coated man was stern yet courteous. This area provided us with an anonymous tip regarding incorrect labeling and possible cross-contamination. He used the flat of his pen to indicate my prep area. I blinked. What no? Yesterday, everything was examined twice. Before I departed, I went over everything. The inspector didn't appear to be persuaded. He gestured for one of the helpers to begin removing ingredients from the shelf. I had made the sauce base from scratch. It was 2 nights ago. Lost. I've bagged and tagged my spice mixes. There was a yellow sticker even on the rosemary oil I had made myself. We cannot permit these to be used in a public tasting without the appropriate documentation. Oh, the inspector said. Marco maintained his composure, but I could see his jaw tighten. This was not an unexpected development. When the inspector had gone, he mumbled, "You're wanted off the board by someone." He did not have to name them. Then he said, "Someone." My stomach grew constricted. I could see her. Seraphine groomed fingertips typing out a message on her phone, probably in the middle of a facial. I didn't weep, not then. But later that night, when I returned to the storage cooler to fetch the backup source just in case I found the shelf vacant, everything was gone. Not just my supplies, but even the backup herbs I'd kept away with my name plainly labeled. Panic swelled in my throat. I started opening every container, sifting through containers. Nothing. That's when I got the notification. Seraphine had submitted a new clip, a close-up of a roast dish, framed just perfectly with a drizzle pattern. I realized to well my plating my garnish. My God, the identical garnish I'd scrawled in my notepad 2 nights earlier. This was her caption. I peered at the screen as if it were about to break everything inspired by heritage, reinterpreted for contemporary tables, every action, every goal. I carefully placed everything out. It was now public knowledge under her name. Slamming my notepad onto Marco's desk, I rushed back into the prep area. Everything has been taken. My voice was hoarse as I spoke. The roast, the concept, even the components. Now it's all hers. Marco cautiously raised his head. He didn't look pitying at me. They cut straight through the rage. Equally, he said now. Do you cook out of fear of failing, or do you cook as if you had nothing left to defend? His remarks were more impactful than everything that had occurred over the whole week. My hands were shaking, but not because of terror as I made my way back into the kitchen. I started extracting what remained this time. Tucked up at the rear of the top shelf are a few root vegetables, a bouquet of wilting parsley, and cracked black pepper in a paper tin. Too harsh for company refers to a container of clove powder I brought from home, the same one my mother consistently refused to use. I took a harsh, raw, and familiar breath after opening the lid. After rolling my sleeves, I began cutting. I made another change to the roast recipe, not to save what had been taken, but to create something that was impossible for her to copy since it originated from a location she was unaware of. Once more, I thought about Grandma, her peaceful fire, her table, and her obstinate hands. And I reflected on all the times I had become smaller to fit in with a family that valued quiet, yet frowned upon individualism. At 2 a.m, this version of the meal did not request permission. I plated it. Mine, but not flawless. I snapped a photo, just for proof, not for uploading. A notification appeared. I noticed the post that Tessa posted. "Do you want me to go?" "Simply say it." I paused for a moment before answering. "Arrive early. Don't forget your camera." Since serving a story before they can modify it is the only way to safeguard it, we will record everything they attempt to steal. As the catering crew drove by with carts of linens and glasses, Tessa and I waited just inside the loading doors, the pavement outside being misted by a gentle shower. As I examined my crate of last items for the third time, she adjusted the strap on her camera bag. "Are you ready?" Her question was hardly audible above a whisper. "No," I thought. However, I gave a nod. The downtown sampling event was being hosted in an ancient brick structure with steel beams and exposed plumbing that had been somewhat renovated to feel modern. To remind everyone that the reason they were here was genuine. The space was filled with 8 tables each with its own spotlight. I had acquired booth number 6 because to Marco's contacts, and I became aware of who was stationed just next to me as we approached it. Sarah. All right, naturally. While her lover held a mirror for last-minute lipstick checks, she was in full bloom chatting to a local TV anchor with 2 attendants at her sides. Wearing one of her grandmother's old brooches, she wore it sideways as if it were now her own emblem. She grinned when I looked at her. Courteous, empty, calculated. I started emptying my container without saying anything. Tessa gently positioned herself, shooting over my shoulder while blending in like the press. I had just begun setting up my equipment when a young chef with a clipboard and a man bun passed by. "Hey," he replied nonchalantly, gesturing to my table. "You stole your sister's roast idea, didn't you?" "It's kind of brave of you to come here. I went cold. I apologize, but he was already on his way to the judge's table." Tessa halted the video. What on earth was that before I could respond? I overheard a brief exchange of words from behind Sarah Finn's booth. The Brock brand is favored by investors. Nobody wishes to wager on a wild card. Consistency is more important than kitchen drama. A wild card. My name was now barely audible. A drawback. Gazing at the freebies, I returned to my booth. The ingredient narrative, my method, and even a memorial to Grandma Eileen were all detailed in printed pages. Something didn't seem right. I grabbed one. I didn't own it. Inspired by the culinary heritage of the Brock family, the glossy pages were named and printed in a corporate serif font. My name appeared once buried at the bottom of the last page like a legal disclaimer. Tessa saw my hands shaking. It was altered by them. "Flatly?" I replied. "It was rewritten?" She made the correction. I didn't speak. I just reached for the blackboard. We had packed the one Tessa had suggested as a backup in case I needed something more personal with one piece of white chalk and a long, calm breath. I scribbled the sentence I'd been repeating to myself all week. A few recipes are passed down through the generations. Others are taken back. Before she even realized it was there, Tessa moved back, filmed her hand, and wiped a tear from her face. The judges started moving about. They were not ostentatious. No fanfare, no entourage, only notebooks. Sharp vision and experienced taste buds. Then I caught sight of him. One of the principal investors is James Rollins. Months prior, Sarah Finn had attempted to win Evelyn over. He paused at my booth and examined the plate. It had strong, uncooked edges and a burned umber sauce with roasted citrus peels, powdered clove, and hand flakes. Just what was important, no ornamentation. He leaned closer. "I've been hearing about an innovative roast. Is this it?" I looked him in the eye. "No," I said. "They took that one. I own this one." After giving a hesitant nod, he grabbed the spoon. I held my breath, but the voice I had been anticipating came before it made contact with the plate. "This is a family matter, isn't it?" With her own silver tasting spoon in hand, Finn murmured sweetly as she moved up next to him. She glanced at the whiteboard and then down at the plate. She grinned tightly. She remarked that the drama would have delighted Grandma. She loved the truth more, I told her, looking her in the eye without flinching. Serafina grasped the spoon as if she were about to do a show. With practiced grace, she dragged it across the sauce, dipped it into the roasted medallion, and brought it to her lips. Then she hesitated a moment. Her face broke. It was just barely noticeable. The corner of her lips twitched. Her eye flickered. After swallowing, she straightened her back as if she had tasted vinegar rather than citrus and clove. "It's daring, she did it." Voice clipped. Evelyn stepped in at that point. She wore clothes for TV, not fashion. Too tall for the kitchen. Pearls hung like armor around her neck. Before she could say anything, her eyes narrowed as they surveyed the throng before settling on me. "You've turned this into a show," she remarked, loud enough to be heard by the surrounding investors. "Dalara, this is defamation. Our family is becoming a public spectacle because of you." I didn't flinch. Seraphin piped in, moving just slightly behind our mother like she usually did when things got contentious. "You used a lottery ticket to pay your way into this event." She laughed. "That's not skill, it's just luck. Disguised as a hustler." It wasn't what she said that hurt. It was their ease of arrival, as if she had practiced them in front of the mirror. I reached inside the inner pocket of my apron. I took the little packet out. Unmarked cream in tone with a little edge at the corners from too many handlings. I raised it. "I handed you this ticket." I spoke in a forceful yet composed tone. "The one that you choose not to open. The one you discarded. Just like everything else I've attempted to provide for this family." The room trembled, and there was a noticeable silence, as if everyone had turned down the volume save for my speech. Nevertheless, I went on facing the judges and investors. What they threw away was the foundation of this entire presentation and this particular moment. I didn't just happen to be here. I salvaged what remained to get here. Right immediately, Tessa moved forward. She was holding her phone. With a subtle gesture to the IT team managing the event's AV, "The screen is already lighted." She brought it up to the above microphone and tapped the play button. Evelyn's voice, recorded only days before, emerged from the speakers. Not quite clear, but grainy. "In any case, nobody wants to hear Laura's side of the tale. It's terribly depressing. Too disorganized. Everything is brighter, cleaner, and more palatable, Sarah." There was an electrifying hush. The sound of camera shutters followed. Investors whispering, journalists typing. One of the judges came up and indicated my booth. "However, this is the only unique meal served here tonight. This is the only one that hasn't been given a press kit." Then came another. "We've had enough publicity. Instead of using strategy, I would rather to be a chef who cooks from scars." Evelyn opened her lips to say something else, but nothing came out. Seraphin was the first to retreat. She didn't have a line to end the scene for once. A man with gray hair and a kind voice approached my table and placed a business card next to my blackboard sign. He gave me a direct glance. "We're willing to support your idea, but only if the story remains yours," he stated. "Your voice, your kitchen," Tessa murmured behind me as I glanced at the card and then back at him. "They're heading out. They were there when I turned. Mom, my sister is leaving." The last phrase they were unable to type was punctuated by the tapping of heels on the showroom floor. That evening, they departed without saying anything more. I also didn't go after them. I didn't have to. 6 months later, the room I had only dared to sketch on notebook paper was filled with the faint buzz of clinking forks and the gentle rustle of napkins. With only 26 seats, light wood floors, and subtle copper lighting that warmed the space without trying too hard, my restaurant was small. The front window was painted with the name. No italics, no frills, read Dalara. Only my. I made my way carefully across the floor, stopping at every table. Despite the modest launch, every seat was occupied. Without making it about retaliation, Tessa had assisted in spreading the message. "Let the food speak first," she advised. The apron I donned in culinary school was still on me. The lottery ticket was still in the pocket close to my waist, despite some fraying. I had already won something greater, so I wasn't scared of losing. Some things are more valuable when left unsaid. Close to the room's corner, a table with 4 tops sat silently. Evelyn, Seraphin, Tessa, Aunt, Sylvia. In an attempt to maintain her balance between 2 toppling banks, Tessa perched between the 3 of them like a bridge. Since the tasting panel, they had not communicated. Calls had been placed. There have been awkward apologies that never quite land. But perfection was not the goal tonight. It was about making room for the truth. I carried the last course, a recreated version of the cake they used to let drop to the floor as if it didn't matter to their table myself. It was more elegant and smaller this time. Lemon zest cream and bitter chocolate ganache are piled over vanilla bean sponge. The same base but more profound. Grown up now. Sharper. Evelyn gazed at the object. Serafina did the same. Without fanfare, I placed the platter in front of them. The same recipe. Silently, I said, "Reduced sugar." No one immediately grabbed for their forks. Evelyn raised her head. "So you're forgiving us like this?" Her voice inquired. Steady, but aloof. After giving it some thought, I responded clearly. It wasn't until the words were said that I realized I had. No. I feed those who are still discovering the flavor of love in this way. It was not sharp. It wasn't mean. It simply was. Amelia entered through the entrance door that opened from the other side of the room. Once in culinary school, I had the most intense rival. The edges are now softer. She held a little folder and was anxious. She stood just short of the hostess stand and remarked, "I heard you're hiring prep cooks." I gave a nod. I responded softly, "If you bring your own recipes this time." With gratitude and perhaps a hint of relief, she let out a breath. The night came to an end. I went back to the kitchen, where the scent of rosemary and lemon peel warmed the air. With a frame in her arm, Tessa entered the room. She claimed it arrived today. She gave me the black and white picture of me laughing, flames rising from a pan beneath it behind me, spoon in one hand. She had written, "Constructed out of the debris they left behind." After taking a deep breath, I put it close to the door so that visitors might see it. As they departed, they believed that the ticket would make all the difference. However, my life wasn't rebuilt by the money. That's when I realized I could get up without their consent. On a menu, the cake that no one desired had become the star dessert. To taste, they now formed a line,